Have you ever felt like a glitch in the matrix? A soul speaking a language that the majority of the world has forgotten? Do you stroll through rooms and notice the subtle changes in energy, the whispered fears, and the unseen bars that imprison everyone else? If you've ever felt genuinely different, not arrogantly, but painfully isolatingly, this message is no coincidence. It's a divine appointment. You're going to understand why your sheer presence, your calm fearlessness and radical independence, is the most scary force in a fear-driven society. The world doesn't know what to do with individuals like you, the anointed ones, since you are live evidence that the prisons people construct in their minds have no walls. Prepare to learn the 14 reasons why your soul is a silent revolution shaking the foundations of a sleeping civilization. 1. You do not need their permission to exist. This is the fundamental fact that makes the rest of the world feel extremely uncomfortable around you, even if they can't explain why. Most humans are painstakingly trained from infancy to be supplicants, waiting for external signs before daring to move, talk, or dream. They are taught to seek parental approval, peer affirmation, social acceptability, and permission from authoritative persons. Their whole sense of self-worth is a flimsy construct based on 1,000 yes signals from the external world. Their faith depends on this borrowed gasoline. Without it, they halt. But you use an entirely other source of energy. You are not looking for a nod, a thumbs up, or a mark of approval from the audience. You just are. You live, breathe, create, move, and occupy space not because you were given permission, but because it is your divine right. This innate autonomy makes them uncomfortable in ways they would never confess, even to themselves. Your unabashed presence serves as a glaring mirror, reflecting the many permissions they have begged for their whole lives. When they meet you, they are instinctively reminded of a desire they did not follow because their family disapproved. They recall a hobby they abandoned because their friends thought it weird. They felt the weight of the steady, respectable work they accepted not because it nourished their souls, but because it looked good on paper and earned society's approval. Every important move they've ever taken has been a difficult negotiation with the outside world, a trade-off between authenticity and acceptability. And then there you are, a living monument to a life lived without compromise, moving only because your spirit directs it. This type of raw, unfiltered freedom not only confuses them, but also reveals the unseen bars of their own self-imposed prisons. Your style of life reflects a quiet, strong rebellion. You do not need to yell about your independence or fight for the right to be yourself. You just walk in your truth, unabashedly. This drives them insane because they can't reasonably accuse you with arrogance or rebellion. All you do is exist. Their typical methods of social control, the threat of withholding approval, the fear of exclusion, have no effect on you. Because you don't need what they're selling, they can't influence you. What genuinely intimidates them is not your independence, but the sharp contrast it provides, reflecting their own fundamental reliance. You show how little their universe has become, how much of their heavenly essence they have given up for transient approbation, and how little room they genuinely claim for their own innermost wants. They are living as tenants in their own life, always concerned about the landlord's regulations, but you have proclaimed total, divine ownership of yours. Your very presence is a challenge, not because you mean it to be, but because it demonstrates that they have been living on borrowed permission papers, whilst you, the chosen one, have never required one in the first place. 2. You are not chained to their systems. The world wants you to be tied, to be connected to the same control systems that keep everyone else organized and predictable. But you've learned to live, breathe, and flourish outside of them, which is what really worries others about your independence. The simple reality is that most individuals are not steered by their own inner compass or God-given intuition. They are bound by man-made institutions, corporate hierarchies, academic dogmas, and cultural traditions that quietly and ruthlessly prescribe who they should be, what they should desire, and how they should live. They consider what the employer expects, what the political party requires, what the culture accepts, and what the family will endure. Their decisions are not actually their own. They are echoes of the system's message. They have surrendered the scary vastness of freedom for the safe, predictable boundaries of a system that defines them. But you don't follow their rules. You hear a new frequency, a higher calling that comes from outside the system's static noise. In doing so, you destroy the illusion that people have painstakingly constructed their lives around. Your freedom reveals the devious ways in which these institutions are meant to promote reliance. The current corporate system often encourages individuals to feel that their value is closely linked to a title and a salary, instilling a sense of worthlessness without both. Educational institutions may train smart brains to wait for an outside authority to grade their intellect and legitimize their knowledge, suffocating genuine, self-directed wisdom. Even religious groups may develop into systems in which individuals outsource their conscience, relying on a figurehead to tell them if they are good or worthy in God's sight. Most individuals cling to these institutions with desperate grips because they have forgotten who they are without the label, title, or position. However, when you show up, making sovereign choices, forging your own path, and defining your own success without being bound by these external institutions, you compel them to face an unpleasant truth. They have mistaken captivity for stability. They are deeply intimidated by the fact that you are living evidence that survival, prosperity, and even genuine satisfaction do not need subordination to the system. They can't imagine flourishing without being a part in the vast mechanism, but you do so openly and freely. You've learned how to stand out while yet succeeding, how to be in the world but not of it. This calls into question every sacrifice they've ever made, every bit of their soul they've given up for a false feeling of security. Your life becomes a live, breathing counterexample to the fear that keeps people submissive and little. You are incontrovertible proof that the walls they've been leaning upon for protection aren't the only way to stand tall. In fact, those barriers might have been obscuring their view of the sun. Your independence does not imply mindless disobedience. Rather, it is a purposeful rejection to allow man-made systems to determine the endless bounds of your divine potential. And this is quite concerning, since such systems rely on mass compliance to thrive. When someone like you goes outdoors and thrives, it tears a hole in their control. It causes people to think, maybe these chains I've been dragging aren't necessary at all. At that point, their hatred against you isn't really about you. It's about the unsettling, holy light you've shed on their own incarceration. 3. Your peace is not for sale. In a society where practically everything has a price, when integrity, happiness, and dignity are commodities to be bought, sold, and bargained, your inner serenity is the one treasure you will not sell. This is one of the most difficult and aggravating aspects of your personality for others to tolerate. You are living proof that some things are sacrosanct, untouchable, and valuable. The great majority of individuals are prepared to give up their inner calm for nearly anything. Even a little more comfort, a little moment of attention, a promotion, or the sense of security. They will give up their sleep for external acceptance, exchange their self-esteem for a larger wage, and risk their happiness only to retain the flimsy illusion of belonging to a community that does not even nurture their soul. Their inner world is a chaotic bazaar with frequent, frantic exchanges. But you don't do that type of soul bartering. You've gone through the flames of life and come to a deep realization. Your quiet, your interior stillness, is the ultimate currency. It is the pearl of great price, and you will not swap it for the world's treasures. This basic, unyielding position makes you uncontrollable, and the world despises what it cannot control. People are very disturbed by the fact that you cannot be paid, bullied, or persuaded into giving up your tranquility. You cannot be enticed by gold-plated possibilities, gleaming diversions meant to sap your vitality, or the fleeting pleasures of social climbing. You do not stay in poisonous relationships for fear of being alone. You do not compromise your holy ideals only to be included in a circle that requires compliance. When you say no, do it without hesitation, resentment, or malice. It is a whole phrase given with the clarity and tranquility of a soul at peace with itself. This kind of integrated strength unnerves individuals because it reveals how much of their own life they have auctioned off piece by piece in order to feel temporarily accepted or comfortable. People who depend on manipulation, emotional blackmail, or fear-mongering rapidly realize they have no control over you. They cannot scare you with exclusion because you do not need their group to feel whole. They can't dangle material stuff in front of you since your value is based on who you are, not what you own. They can't guilt-trip you into submission because you've realized that your own inner peace is more important than performing a part for someone else's gain. Your unshakable serenity renders their favored techniques completely weak, and they can't take it. The fact is that your unwillingness to sell your tranquility reflects a kind of riches that is unrelated to money. It is the infinite treasure of self-respect, spiritual clarity, and a life lived in accordance with your own principles. And this is really terrifying because, deep down, they know they've sold themselves short, and your presence is a continual, silent reminder of the bad deal they made. You've become a quiet rebel against a world based on compromise. That's why your peace poses such a danger. It does more than simply safeguard you. It reveals others' spiritual bankruptcy, since they sold theirs away without recognizing the unfathomable cost. 4. You move without fear of loss. You walk through the world with elegance and freedom that others cannot understand. And this is because you are not bound by the one thing that keeps the rest of mankind captive, the dread of loss. Loss is the invisible leash that keeps the majority of people submissive, cooperative, and little. It is the subtle tyrant over their life. They stick to soul-crushing employment because they are afraid of financial ruin. They stay in partnerships that strangle their spirits because they can't handle the notion of being lonely. They swallow their words, bite their tongues, and suppress their own inner voice for fear of losing their reputation, social status, or the acceptance of others. Their whole life is a defensive crouch, a frantic effort to defend what they have, unaware that their fear is the prison that keeps them from fully living. However, you are not like everyone else. You have already confronted loss front-on. You've journeyed through the barren valleys of heartache, the stinging deserts of disappointment, the chilly nights of rejection, the bitter poison of treachery, and the harsh winds of financial hardship. You've reached the bottom and found something wonderful in the depths. You survived. Not only did you survive, but you came out with strength and insight that can only be created in fire. That survival dispelled the myth that loss might ruin your true being. You no longer live in continual dread of loss after you've made peace with it and realized that nothing genuinely important can ever be taken away from you. This is what makes you so dangerously unpredictable in a society that values predictability and control. When people discover they can't control you with their normal threats, the worry of losing love, prestige, or money, they go into a state of silent terror. All of their weaponry and control mechanisms are rendered worthless against you. You've previously gone through the fire they're threatening you with, and you've learned that survival doesn't necessarily imply holding closer. Sometimes genuine survival, true liberty, is letting go with grace. Your fearlessness in the face of loss shows, in an unsettling way, how flimsy other people's confidence is. They feel they are powerful, but that strength is dependent on their circumstances being constant. The thought of losing anything disturbs their whole foundation. You, on the other hand, have already confronted, grieved, and buried the same anxieties they are now avoiding. You understand in your bones that ending a relationship does not imply losing yourself. You understand that losing a job does not imply losing your infinite worth. You understand that losing the crowd's favor does not imply losing your holy voice. This tremendous insight is alarming because it demonstrates to others that the shackles they wear are composed of thinking rather than iron. These are mental constructions. The ultimate irony is that the things people are most afraid of losing are the precise things that keep them enslaved. Their frantic, white-knuckle grasp on their existence makes them simple to manipulate, anticipate, and silence. But you are free now because you have overcome the enormous delusion that loss defines you. That independence empowers you in ways that others cannot grasp. They cannot confine you. They cannot negotiate with your terror. They cannot frighten you into submitting. And that is why your mere existence disturbs them to the core. Because you walk with a spiritual freedom that demonstrates nothing and no one in this world genuinely possesses you. 5. You refuse to worship their gods. This is what actually distinguishes you from the herd, which people find both interesting and annoying. You refuse to bow down to their gods. These gods aren't antique stone sculptures or gilded thrones in remote temples. They are the unseen, modern-day idols that stealthily rule and damage the lives of the majority. This generation's principal gods are popularity, money, and approval. Entire lives and identities are methodically built around serving these fickle deities. People determine their self-worth based on the number of followers who like them, the amount of money they can flaunt, or the number of heads that nod in agreement when they speak. They blindly serve these heroes, forsaking their honesty, integrity, and uniqueness for a fleeting sensation of belonging. But you don't bow. You do not kneel. And their reluctance to join in the communal worship shakes the fundamental foundation they stand on. Your independence in this respect is terrifying, since your simple, peaceful refusal to participate reveals their devotion for what it is: disguised enslavement. They really feel they are pursuing their aspirations, but in fact they are just following the unspoken commands of idols they have never questioned. Their whole feeling of significance, the very reason they get out of bed, is based on being noticed, complimented, and envied. But you walk with a calm, unwavering power that comes from an interior, spiritual source. And it is a power that no external idol can ever provide. You do not need the crowd's applause to support your decisions. You do not need tangible prizes or fancy labels to demonstrate your achievement. You don't need committee approval to feel authentic and validated in your own flesh. This helps you stand out with a gentle brightness, even when you don't try. People who have built their whole identity on these heroes feel personally threatened by your existence because it breaks the spell they are under. When people see you prospering, joyous, and serene without feverishly pursuing fame, they are forced to rethink why they have been behaving like circus animals for an audience that cares nothing about them. When people see you stay grounded and focused, without money defining your character or happiness, they understand how fragile their own confidence, which is based on a financial balance, is. When people see you moving with strong purpose, without asking or fishing for praise, they realize how hooked they have gotten to the addiction of external validation. Your presence provokes an unpleasant internal confrontation with the superficial lifestyles they have been leading. They can't label you as bitter or jealous, since you're obviously not unhappy. They cannot accuse you of arrogance, since you are not seeking an audience or attempting to convert them. You are simply and radiantly free. That liberation is louder and more powerful than their feverish adoration. It is live evidence that the things people submit to are fully discretionary, not absolute. And it is what shakes them to their very core. Your independence is more than simply living your truth. It's a quiet interruption, a living reminder that the gods they've built their whole lives around were never real. 6. You do not crave their spotlight. In a world where people scurry, claw, and plead for attention like it's oxygen, you move at a different pace. This alone makes you an insoluble problem that they cannot ignore. The contemporary soul is fixated with being seen, applauded, and acknowledged. Its feeling of value is so externalized that it fades when no one is cheering, observing, or validating its every action. For many, life has become a never-ending act on stage, with the whole world serving as both audience and critic. You may feel alive even without an audience. Your soul flourishes just as much in the hallowed shadows as in the wide sunshine. People are genuinely disturbed by this tremendous independence from the desire for attention, since it demonstrates how shallow and intense their own craving for the limelight is. What bothers them the most is the ultimate irony of it all. You don't want the limelight, yet when you enter into a room, the energy naturally changes and bends toward you. The spotlight finds you. This does not occur because you are asking for it by loud conduct or showy looks. It occurs because sincerity has a spiritual weight and presence that cannot be manufactured or disregarded. People feel this silent power in you before their brains can understand it. That serene assurance, that unbothered presence, that centeredness that begs for nothing. It works like a magnet. And while others have been acting ceaselessly, tap dancing for applause in order to be recognized, you attract attention with minimal effort. This irritates them on a subliminal level because it reveals a fact they badly want to deny. Pursuing affirmation seldom results in it, but being self-possessed and entire nearly always does. Your failure to submit to the god of the spotlight is really dangerous because it utterly undermines the game they are all playing. Their whole life is based on proving themselves, creating the ideal public image, and fiercely striving for recognition. You've already stepped off the tiresome treadmill. You are not hungry for likes, acclaim, or titles. And since you desire nothing they can provide, you are hard for them to manage or classify. They cannot entice you with the prospect of stardom. They cannot entice you with the promise of attention. And they cannot blame you for being missed or unnoticed because you have already shown to yourself that your essential worth is constant and does not change depending on who is looking. This amount of spiritual freedom makes their desired limelight seem less like a throne of authority and more like a gilded prison. The harsh fact they cannot accept is that the spotlight was never the prize, it was the chain. And by refusing to want it, you have achieved freedom in a manner that most others would never believe conceivable. That is why your presence hurts them so much. Not only do you not want recognition, rather, recognition seeks you out, attracted to the brightness of your real spirit. And in that calm, unmistakable fact, they are forced to confront how weak and empty their own sense of self has become. Because without the attention of others, they feel as if they have vanished. While you remain solid, entire, and genuine, whether seen or unseen. 7. Your spirit disrupts the herd mentality. This feature alone makes others feel uncomfortable around you since you are a live contradiction to their basic survival strategy. Most individuals travel in herds, not because they have a common, conscious goal, but because there is perceived safety in numbers. The herd gives them unstated license to relinquish personal responsibility and critical thinking. If everyone is doing it, thinking it, or saying it, then no one individual has to shoulder the awful weight of standing alone, of being possibly incorrect, of being the solitary focus of criticism. The herd provides a haven for the terrified, but you don't move that way. You have the spiritual bravery to go against the grain and accept your own soul's direction, even if it takes you down a route no one else is taking. You are willing to make decisions that are not supported or justified by the comfort of majority acceptance. This dramatic independence severely disturbs the herd because it demonstrates how much of their so-called confidence is only available when they are comfortably buried behind the anonymity of a multitude. The fact is that the herd mentality is based on fear rather than solidarity. It is the dread of standing out, being judged, making a mistake, or being abandoned. People cling to what others are doing because they are afraid of these core worries. They would rather be collectively unhappy and incorrect, headed toward a cliff with the rest of the herd, than risk being individually free and correct. When you break free from the rush and not only survive, but flourish, you demonstrate that their worst fears were never as real as they thought. You survive without the group's help. You make good judgments without their approval. You lead a full and lively life without their consent. This scares them because it reveals how little genuine power the herd truly has. Your spirit is terrifying because it does more than simply liberate you. It secretly confronts the whole system of conformity. By fearlessly selecting your own route, you cast a bright light on the futility of mindlessly following. You force people to ask themselves the questions they've been desperately avoiding. Do I truly believe in the choices I've made? Or have I just been swept along by the current? Is this my life? Or am I just rehearsing a script written by the majority? For the most part, the answer is profoundly uncomfortable. They come to the sobering understanding that they haven't really lived. They have just been conforming. Your presence exposes something they don't want to admit. Standing alone is not only conceivable, but also the ultimate expression of power. And once the seed of truth is established in their thoughts, they will never look at themselves or the herd the same way again. This is why people hurry to call you a rebel, haughty, tough, or troublemaker. It is not because you are any of those things, but because it is much simpler to condemn and ostracize the one who walks away than to confess they never had the bravery to go in the first place. Your independence not only distinguishes you, but it also reveals the silent shackles of fear that bind the herd together. And that discovery shocks them to the core. Message from God Connection.